Hey everybody, it's John Skiba again from the Consumer Warrior Project. I'm also an attorney at the Arizona Consumer Law Group. And in today's video, I wanted to discuss the fun topic of wage garnishment, which, when I meet with clients here in my law practice, this is one of the number one things that really stresses people out. And this makes sense because there was a study done by CNN a few years back that said that 76% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So the thought of having, a part of your paycheck taken out every 2 weeks is really troublesome to most people because they won't be able to make ends meet. They won't be able to make the mortgage or the rent or even buy groceries and other necessities. So I wanted to kind of clear up some of the misconceptions about wage garnishment. And if you are facing a wage garnishment, we can talk about some of the things that you can do to try to get rid of it. I've also written a ton of articles and have other videos here on the Consumer Warrior Project Facebook page or on my website at consumerwarrior.com. I put a link over there by the comments. But the first thing that I want to talk about is a lot of people don't realize that creditors, particularly like credit card companies and things like that, they can't garnish your wages unless they actually have a judgment against you. I meet with people and they'll say, hey, I fell behind on my credit card, I'm 60 days late on this, are they going to garnish my wages? And really, that's not how this whole thing works. They actually have to go to court, get a judgment signed by a judge before they're going to be able to garnish your wages. And with most credit card companies, that takes a while. The typical debt collection cycle is a creditor, if you fall behind on your credit card, they'll do some internal collections for a 30 to 60 day period. Then they may kick it out to a collection agency for another 30 days. And then they may kick it out to another collection agency. Anyways, and it goes on. And nowadays, most creditors, once you become about 4 to 6 months past due, they'll charge it off and they will then package it up and sell it to these companies called debt buyers. And then they'll usually hang on to it for, frankly, a couple of years before they'll actually take action and file a lawsuit against you. So the fact that you've fallen behind on your credit card or other types of debts, usually that doesn't mean that they're going to sue you immediately and you're at risk of any kind of garnishment. It's going to take a while for them to be able to do that. There are some exceptions when it comes to things like student loans and taxes. The government has a lot more power than everybody else. By the way, when I talk about student loans, it's usually federal loans, not the private loans. They have what's called administrative wage garnishment power, which means they don't have to go through the whole lawsuit process. But let's go over 3 ways that you can deal with a wage garnishment if that's something that you're going through right now. The first is you can attack the underlying judgment. Like I said, they have to have a judgment to be able to do a wage garnishment. So the question you have to ask yourself is, how did they get this judgment? Now, in most of the cases that I deal with, where it's like a credit card company that's sued, they get a default judgment, meaning that they sued the consumer didn't respond for some reason, and the court just granted judgment, gave them what they were asking. In a lot of those cases, if you go back and look at how they actually got the judgment, there may have been a problem with the way that they served you with the lawsuit, or did they follow the procedures that were necessary to get the default judgment? Because if they didn't, you can then go back to the court and ask them to review that, and you have to file a written document called a motion to vacate the judgment, saying that they shouldn't be able to garnish because the underlying judgment isn't valid. So the first way is to attack that. Depending on the facts of your case, that may or may not be sufficient. As far as it may be difficult to do that if you don't have good facts. Second one is to settle it. Settlement is a little tough when you get to the garnishment stage, because if you think about it, now the creditor has all of the leverage. They could say no to whatever offer you're willing to pay, and you're in a situation where they say no, and then they're just continuing to take your paycheck. Here in Arizona, they can take up to 25% of each paycheck in a wage garnishment. But with a lot of creditors, if you are able to come up with a lump sum, even if that lump sum is less than the total amount what they're claiming is owed, having that lump sum now is better than stretching it out over years for them to get paid through a wage garnishment. So that's a way that can be dealt with. Third way, a way which we deal with a lot in my law practice, is bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is I always say, nobody wants to file for bankruptcy, but it is a very powerful tool in that as soon as a bankruptcy is filed, it stops the wage garnishment. And that's the one thing. I mean, everybody, they need that to stop. If 76% of us are living paycheck to paycheck, even having one check garnished is too much. And so we file the bankruptcy, that stops the wage garnishment. That can be done fairly quickly. And then it actually eliminates the underlying debt as well. So bankruptcy is an option, and frankly, the garnishment is what pushes a lot of people into a bankruptcy type setting, just because they can't live, they can't meet their basic obligations if they're being garnished. I should throw out there's a fourth option, and that's just to allow the garnishment to kind of play out. In Arizona, like I said, they can take 25% of each paycheck, but they can ask that it be reduced down to 15% if there's a showing of hardship. And that shouldn't be too hard to do, because with most people, if you're losing a full quarter of your check every 2 weeks, that's going to cause some kind of hardship. So that's a possibility as well. If you're thinking of going that route, you ought to look at what the interest rate is on the judgment. With a lot of these credit card judgments, it's accruing interest, it's clipping along at 30% kind of thing. And the concern there is that they're going to garnish your wage, and you're really not making a dent in it, and it's just getting worse as time goes on. So that's kind of just in a nutshell, kind of the wage garnishment as it is in Arizona. If you're dealing with wage garnishment, you want some more information on it, again, we have our website address there in the comments section, consumerwarrior.com. We have a lot of information there. I have over 500 articles I've written, about 100 videos on these types of topics.